Hi, I'm Marty West, Executive Editor at Education Next, and I'm here today with Mark Schneider, formerly the Commissioner of the National Center for Education Statistics, currently a Vice President at American Institutes for Research, and also the author of a very hard-hitting article in the latest issue of Education Next. Now, Mark, your piece is quite critical of the push for international benchmarking in American education, and in particular of the idea that American states should participate separately in the Program for International Student Assessment, or the PISA exams carried out by the OECD every 3 years. Now, usually researchers like you are out there pushing for more and better data on student outcomes. Why not in this case?
So there are a couple of answers to that question, of course. So the first thing is I want to distinguish between two kinds of data that could come out of the PISA assessment. So the first piece of data that comes out are what are commonly called league tables, the ranking of countries on how well they've done on these assessments. So when these come out, this is what gets all the attention. Mm-hmm. I actually have no problems with the league tables. I think the league tables are actually very important. And they are a wake-up call for countries like the United States that aren't doing anywhere near as well as they should be. What my problem is with the data that comes out of PISA is that OECD actually conducts a lot of analysis and then publishes very detailed reports about what they believe is in the PISA test. I have a problem with that.
Could you give us an example of some of the problems that crop up in these OECD reports?
Well, I think that the level of analysis and the quality of the statistical analysis that PISA engages, that OECD engages in, is actually below the standard that any of us would accept as good social science or education research. So in the article, I talk about one of the chapters and go through it in some detail, and it starts in a very typical OECD fashion. It says, here are the limits on PISA. It's a cross-sectional analysis. Students may have been in the school that they're assessed in because they're 15-year-olds. They may have been in the school for a year. It's a literacy study, which means we're supposedly tapping all of the learning that's gone on in the society and the different schools that they've been in. We rely on principled reports. There may be errors in that. So there's lists, and it may be 6 or 7 caveats. And then the rest of the chapter blithely ignores all those caveats. And they go ahead and table upon table and chart upon chart of outcomes. And then they list policy implications that are supposedly built on the data, but in fact could have been written before the analysis was done. Let's talk about the state participation, because I think that's a serious issue. So right now, the National Governors Association and the chief state school officers are talking about and pushing for state participation in PISA. And what you would get if you did state participation in PISA, you would be able to get a list where states are interwoven into this international comparison. It turns out, in fact, that there are cheaper ways of doing it. So TIMSS, for example, which is another big international assessment, Gary Phillips, who actually is a colleague of mine at AIR, has been able to put states using NAEP scores.
The National Assessment of Educational Progress.
Has been able to put states into the TIMSS league tables. And he's done this for free.
Thanks, Mark, for taking the time to talk with us today.
My pleasure.